The Anima, Jung's guide to the feminine soul within every man. Have you ever locked eyes with a stranger across a crowded room and felt your entire world tilt on its axis? Not just attraction, something deeper, something that whispers, "I know you," as if that person holds a key to a door inside yourself you didn't know existed. Or perhaps you've experienced this. A woman enters your life, and suddenly every song makes sense, colors seem brighter, life pulses with meaning you can't quite name. And when she leaves, the world doesn't just lose its color. It reveals that the magic was never about her at all. Jung spent decades exploring this mystery. What he discovered was so profound, so unsettling, that it fundamentally changes how we understand ourselves. He found that every man carries within him a hidden feminine presence, an inner woman he's never met, but has known his entire life. Jung called her the Anima, and she's been orchestrating your attractions, your obsessions, your heartbreaks, and your dreams from the shadows of your unconscious mind. This isn't about gender politics or social roles. This is about something far more primal and mysterious. The Anima is your soul's guide, your gateway to emotional depth, your bridge to the unconscious. But when you're unaware of her existence, she becomes a tyrant projecting herself onto every woman you meet, creating impossible expectations, leaving you perpetually searching for someone who can't never be found because she's not out there. She's in here. And until you meet her, truly meet her, you'll keep seeking her reflection in the eyes of others, mistaking projection for connection, confusing your inner world with the outer one. The journey to understand the Anima is the journey to understand yourself, and it begins with a question Jung asked that most men never consider. Who is the woman living inside you? Let me tell you about Michael. He's 34, successful by conventional measures, yet he can't shake a feeling that something's wrong with his relationships. Every woman he dates starts as the one, different from all the others, finally the real thing. For a few weeks, maybe months, she seems perfect. She understands him, she sees him, the connection feels faded, significant, real. Then something shifts. The pedestal cracks. She reveals herself to be human, flawed, ordinary, and Michael feels betrayed, not by her, but by reality itself. How could he have been so wrong? How could someone who seemed so right become so disappointing? And why does this pattern keep repeating, relationship after relationship, each beginning with certainty and ending in disillusionment? Michael isn't unusual. Walk through any city, scroll through any dating app, listen to the conversations in any bar, and you'll hear variations of the same story. Men describing women in terms of completion. She completes me. She's my better half. I'm not whole without her. Language that sounds romantic, but reveals something stranger underneath. A sense that something essential is missing inside, and it can only be found in feminine form. Or consider David, who's been married 15 years. He loves his wife, respects her, builds a life with her. Yet he finds himself haunted by fantasies of other women, not sexual necessarily, but emotional. Women who seem to embody qualities his life lacks: spontaneity, mystery, depth, creative fire. He's not unhappy, but he's restless, as if his soul is reaching for something his circumstances can't provide. He feels guilty about these fantasies, tries to suppress them, but they persist like a recurring dream. Then there's Alex, who avoids relationships entirely. After a devastating breakup years ago, he decided women were too complicated, too emotional, too much trouble. He's built a fortress of rationality, pride himself on logic and self-sufficiency, but late at night, scrolling through social media, seeing couples, hearing love songs, He feels an ache he can't name and won't acknowledge. Something exiled, something denied, something banging on the doors of consciousness, asking to be let back in. 3 men, 3 different approaches to the same mystery. And here's what's fascinating. Conventional relationship advice fails all 3 of them. Tell Michael to have more realistic expectations. He already knows that intellectually. Tell David to focus on his marriage. He's trying. Tell Alex to open his heart again. He's heard it 1,000 times. The problem isn't in their behavior. It's not about communication skills or compatibility or timing. The problem is that none of them realize they're searching for someone who isn't out there at all. Because here's what nobody tells you. That perfect woman who haunts your imagination, who appears in your dreams, who you think you glimpse in the eyes of strangers, she's real. But she's not external, she's a part of you. She's been inside you since birth, shaping your desires, coloring your perceptions, guiding your attractions from behind a veil you've never noticed. This is the secret that lies at the heart of masculine psychology, the truth that Jung spent decades unraveling. Every man carries within his unconscious mind a feminine presence, a soul image he inherited from the collective experience of humanity. She contains everything your conscious masculine identity has rejected, ignored, or never developed. Emotional depth, intuitive knowing, receptivity, creative imagination, connection to the unconscious. When you don't know she exists, she runs your life from the shadows. She projects herself onto the women you meet, painting them with her qualities, making you see them not as they are, but as reflections of her. You fall in love with your own projection, then wake up confused when the real woman doesn't match the image. She creates impossible standards because she's archetypal, not personal. A goddess figure, not a human being. She makes you seek completion outside yourself because you haven't recognized she's already inside. She leaves you perpetually dissatisfied because you're trying to find in external relationships what can only be discovered through internal integration. This is why that initial magnetism fades. It was never about the other person. It was about your anima momentarily awakening, projecting herself outward, showing you possibilities of feeling and depth you carry within but haven't claimed. When the projection lifts, when you see the actual woman standing before you rather than your soul image, you feel disappointed. Not because she changed, but because you were never really seeing her to begin with. And here's the truly unsettling part. This isn't conscious. You don't choose it. You can't think your way out of it. The anima operates from the unconscious, from depths of psyche that precede language and rationality. She's been there since your first breath, assembled from experiences with your mother, your culture's images of femininity, and something even deeper ancestral memories, archetypal patterns that Jung called the collective unconscious. She's why certain faces stop you in your tracks, why specific qualities obsess you, why you're drawn to women who embody traits you can't articulate. She's the curator of your attractions, the architect of your romantic dreams, the author of the stories you tell yourself about love. But she's not your enemy. She's actually your guide. The question is whether you'll meet her consciously, integrate her wisdom, allow her to lead you to psychological wholeness, or whether you'll spend your life chasing her reflection in the world outside, mistaking external women for the internal feminine you've yet to discover. Jung understood that until a man encounters his anima and begins the work of integration, he remains incomplete, perpetually seeking in others what he refuses to acknowledge in himself. The journey inward, toward this inner feminine presence, is perhaps the most important psychological work a man can do. But it requires something most men fear, turning away from the outer search and facing the inner mystery. Carl Jung discovered the anima through a method most scientists would consider madness. He descended into his own unconscious. After his break with Freud in 1913, Jung experienced what he called his confrontation with the unconscious, a period of intense inner turmoil where he deliberately engaged with the images, figures, and voices that emerged from the depths of his psyche. During these encounters, Jung met her, a feminine presence in his inner world who spoke to him, challenged him, revealed dimensions of himself he'd never acknowledged. She wasn't a hallucination or a symptom of illness. She was, Jung realized, a structural component of the male psyche, as real and necessary as any organ in the body, yet psychological rather than physical. He named her the Anima, from the Latin for soul, and what he discovered about her changed psychology forever. The Anima, Jung explained, is the personification of all feminine psychological qualities in a man's unconscious. She's not literally a woman living inside you, but a function of psyche, a psychological structure that carries everything your conscious masculine identity has excluded. If you've developed yourself primarily through reason, she embodies emotion. If you pride yourself on strength, she holds tenderness. If you've mastered the external world, she guards the internal one. She's the contrasexual archetype, the psychological opposite that makes you whole. Because here's what Jung understood that most people miss. You're not entirely masculine. No one is purely one thing. The psyche contains opposites, polarities, a full spectrum of human possibilities. But we develop a conscious identity, what Jung called the ego, by selecting some traits and suppressing others. In most cultures, boys are taught to develop masculine qualities: assertiveness, logic, independence, toughness, goal orientation. Feminine qualities: emotional sensitivity, intuition, receptivity, imagination, vulnerability, get pushed down into the unconscious. Not because they're bad, but because they don't fit the image of manhood the culture approves. But the psyche doesn't eliminate what consciousness rejects. It simply relocates it. All those undeveloped feminine qualities gather in the unconscious and coalesce into a personified image, the Anima. She becomes the representative of your unlived life, the carrier of possibilities you've never explored, the guardian of psychological territories you've never visited. And because she's unconscious, she's autonomous. She has her own will, her own moods, her own way of seeing the world. She influences you without your knowing it, shapes your perceptions without permission, orchestrates your emotional life from behind the scenes. This is why Jung said a man's anima holds him hostage until he recognizes her. As long as she remains unconscious, she acts through you rather than with you. She creates moodiness you can't explain, sudden depressions, irrational sensitivities, emotional storms that seem to come from nowhere. She generates fantasies and obsessions. She projects herself onto women in your life, causing you to see them not as they are, but as she is. The mechanism of projection is crucial here. When a psychological content is unconscious, the psyche tends to project it outward. You see in others what you can't see in yourself. For a man, this means his anima, containing all his undeveloped femininity, gets projected onto actual women. He meets a woman and unconsciously drapes her with his anima's qualities. She becomes magical, idealized, more than human. She seems to embody depth, meaning, soul itself. This is the enchantment phase that Michael experiences. He's not seeing the woman, he's seeing his own soul reflected back. And because the anima is archetypal, connected to timeless images of the feminine, the attraction feels fated, cosmic, destined. Of course she seems special. She's carrying his own divinity, but projections don't last. Reality eventually intrudes. The actual woman has her own psychology, her own complexity, her own ordinariness. When the projection lifts, the man feels betrayed, confused, disappointed. He doesn't realize the issue isn't that he chose wrong. It's that he was never choosing based on the real person to begin with. Jung identified 4 mental stages of the anima, showing how this inner feminine presence evolves as a man psychologically matures. Understanding these stages is like having a map of your own inner territory. The first stage is Eve, the anima as primitive, biological, purely instinctual. She represents basic desire, physical attraction, reproduction. A man at this stage sees women purely as objects of desire, bodies to possess, sources of pleasure. His relationships are possessive, concrete, undifferentiated. The Eve anima creates the caveman and mentality women valued only for physical attributes, sexuality without intimacy. The second stage is Helen, named after Helen of Troy. Here the anima becomes romantic, aesthetic, idealized. She's the muse, the inspiration, the beautiful image that motivates heroic deeds. A man at this stage experiences romantic love, poetry, longing. He puts women on pedestals, seeks the perfect beauty, creates elaborate fantasies. Helen represents emotional fascination, but still lacks genuine psychological relationship. She's still an image, not a person. The third stage is Mary, representing spiritual devotion, moral purity, transcendent love. Named after the Virgin Mary, this anima stage brings religious feeling, veneration, a sense of the sacred feminine. The man experiences women as holy, virtuous, spiritually elevated. His love becomes devotional. But there's still a danger here. Idealizing women as pure and spiritual can be another form of not seeing them as complete, complex humans. The fourth and most mature stage is Sophia wisdom itself. Named after the Gnostic goddess of wisdom, this anima represents psychological integration. Here the man has done the work of recognizing his inner feminine, differentiating her from actual women, and integrating her qualities into his conscious personality. Sophia as anima guide leads him to self-knowledge, creative depth, spiritual wisdom. At this stage, he can finally see women as they actually are separate, complete individuals, because he's no longer projecting his unconscious onto them. Most men cycle through these stages, or get stuck at one level. The journey towards Sophia requires what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming psychologically whole by integrating unconscious contents into consciousness. But here's where it gets really interesting. The anima isn't just about relationships with women. She's your bridge to the unconscious itself. Jung discovered that the anima acts as a psychopomp, a guide to the soul's depths. She mediates between ego consciousness and the vast unconscious realm. Through her, you access intuition, creativity, emotional depth, imagination, dreams. When men cut themselves off from emotional life, when they live entirely in their heads, when they dismiss feelings as weakness, they're rejecting the anima. And she doesn't go away. She becomes a negative force, moodiness, irrational behavior, depression, a sense of meaninglessness. Jung called this being animapause, est, when the inner feminine takes over because she's been ignored, erupting in destructive ways. David's restlessness, his fantasies of women who embody depth and spontaneity, that's his anima trying to get his attention. She's showing him what's missing in his psychological life, what he's failed to develop. If he continues to see this as being about external women, he'll remain trapped. But if he recognizes it as a message from his own unconscious, it becomes an invitation to growth. Alex's fortress of rationality is also anima-related. By rejecting relationships and emotional vulnerability, he thinks he's protecting himself, but he's actually split off from his own depths. The anima, rejected and exiled, haunts him from the shadows, that ache he can't name, that longing he won't acknowledge. She's calling him back to psychological wholeness. Jung understood that integration is the goal. Not suppressing the anima, not indulging her projections, but consciously recognizing her, dialoguing with her, allowing her wisdom to inform your life while maintaining your own center. This is the work of psychological maturity, making the unconscious conscious, reclaiming your projections, becoming whole rather than one-sided. The question is, how do you meet her? How do you begin this inner work that sounds so abstract yet holds such practical power over your life? The concept of the anima reaches far beyond psychology into the deepest questions of human existence. What is the self? How do we become whole? What does it mean to know yourself? Socrates declared, "Know thyself." But what self? The conscious ego that believes it's the center of your being. Jung's revolution was recognizing that consciousness is just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it lies an unconscious realm vastly more extensive, more powerful, more real than the small sphere of awareness we call I. The anima reveals that you are not who you think you are. The identity you've constructed yourself, concept, your beliefs about yourself, your personality, is partial, one-sided, a fragment of what you actually contain. You've developed certain traits and suppressed others. You've embraced qualities your culture approves and rejected those it doesn't. You've created what Jung called the persona, a social mask, an acceptable version of yourself that can navigate the world. But the persona isn't the self. Capital-less self, in Jung's framework, represents the totality of your being, conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine, light and shadow, everything you are and could become. The self is the center of the psyche, while the ego is merely the center of consciousness. To confuse ego with self is to mistake a flashlight beam for the entire night sky. The anima confronts you with this reality. She embodies everything your ego isn't, everything your persona excludes. Meeting her means acknowledging, I am more than I've allowed myself to be. The qualities I've projected onto women, emotional depth, intuitive knowing, creative imagination, these aren't foreign. They're mine. They're aspects of myself I've exiled because they didn't fit my image of manhood. This connects to Nietzsche's concept of becoming who you are. Not becoming someone else, not achieving an external goal, but uncovering and actualizing the fullness of your nature. Nietzsche wrote, "What does your conscience say? You shall become the person you are." But how can you become yourself if you don't know yourself? If you've rejected half of what you contain, the anima work is the work of reclamation, taking back the projections, owning the disowned parts, integrating the opposites. This is the alchemical process. Jung studied the transformation of the divided self into a unified whole. Alchemists called it the sacred marriage, the union of king and queen, Sol and Luna, masculine and feminine principles creating gold from lead. But this integration terrifies the ego. The ego wants to remain stable, unchanging, in control. It's built an identity over decades and doesn't want that identity questioned. Acknowledging the anima means admitting, I've been living a partial life. I've been seeing through distorted lenses. The women I've loved, I didn't really see. The emotions I've felt, I didn't understand. The self I've been, I've barely known. This is what the existentialists called authenticity versus bad faith. Sartre argued we constantly flee from authentic existence, the anxiety, producing reality of our freedom and responsibility, into comfortable lies about who we are. We say, I'm just a rational person, or I'm just focused on practical matters, or I don't do emotions. These are forms of bad faith, ways of reducing ourselves to less than we are to avoid the vertigo of possibilities. The Anima won't let you live in bad faith. She disrupts your comfortable lies. She creates obsessions that don't fit your self-image. She generates emotions you can't control. She shows you through your very attractions and fascinations that you're not the limited being you've pretended to be. Kierkegaard would recognize this as the movement from aesthetic to ethical to religious existence, stages of consciousness where we continually transcend limited modes of being toward greater authenticity and depth. The aesthetic stage is seeking pleasure, novelty, distraction, Michael's endless pursuit of the next perfect woman. The ethical stage is accepting responsibility, commitment, reality, David's married life with its undercurrent of restlessness. But the religious stage, in Kierkegaard's sense, is the leap into genuine selfhood, embracing the totality of your being including its paradoxes and mysteries. Eastern philosophy offers parallel insights. The Taoist concept of yin and yang recognizes that opposites aren't enemies but complementary forces that create wholeness. Too much yang masculine energy of action, reason, external mastery, without yin, feminine energy of receptivity, intuition, internal depth, creates imbalance. The Tao Te Ching says, know the masculine, keep to the feminine, not rejecting masculinity, but integrating it with its opposite. Buddhism's teaching about non-self might seem to contradict Jung's emphasis on individuation, but they point toward the same insight. The ego's idea of itself is illusory. What you think of as I is a construct, a story, not ultimate reality. Buddhist practice dismantles the ego's fixations. Jungian practice expands the ego's awareness until it recognizes its place within a larger self. Different paths, similar destination, liberation from the prison of a narrow identity. The Anima embodies what Heidegger might call the not yet of your existence, the unlived possibilities, the roads not taken, the potential self you've never actualized. As long as she remains unconscious, she haunts you with a sense of incompleteness. Your life feels hollow despite external success because you're living a fraction of your possibilities. You're being toward death while ignoring being toward wholeness. This is why the Anima appears most powerfully during midlife crises, moments of transition, periods when the old structures no longer hold. She emerges when your established life stops working, when success feels empty, when you wake up at 40 and wonder, is this all there is? She's the psyche's compensation mechanism, Jung would say balancing one-sidedness by flooding consciousness with what's been excluded. The mystics of every tradition speak of divine union, the soul's marriage with the sacred. Jung recognized these weren't just metaphors. They're psychological realities. The Anima, when consciously integrated, becomes what mystics called the soul. She's the inner guide leading toward transcendence, not by escaping the self, but by completing it. Plotinus wrote of the soul's journey from multiplicity back to the one. Rumi sang of the lover and beloved as one. Christian mystics described spiritual marriage with the divine. Jung saw these as expressions of the same psychological process. The integration of opposites within, the reconciliation of conscious and unconscious, the sacred marriage that births the unified self, but this requires what mystics always demanded, death of the ego. Not literal death, but psychological death, letting go of the limited identity you've clung to, allowing the transformation that comes from embracing your fullness. The caterpillar must dissolve to become the butterfly. Your one-sided masculine identity must dissolve to allow the integrated self to emerge. This is terrifying. It feels like losing yourself, and in a sense, you do lose yourself, the small, defended, limited self. But what emerges is larger, truer, more real. You become not who you thought you should be, but who you actually are. The Anima guides this transformation, but only if you're willing to follow her into the unknown territories of your own depths. The philosophical question isn't whether to make this journey. The question is whether you'll do it consciously, actively engaging the integration process, or whether you'll be dragged through it by suffering, projection, and crisis until you finally turn inward and meet the woman who's been waiting there all along. So how do you actually do this work? How do you meet your Anima, recognize her influence, and begin the integration process? The path is both simple and profoundly difficult. First, you must recognize her presence through her effects. The Anima manifests in specific, identifiable ways. You might notice sudden mood shifts that seem irrational, depression descending for no clear reason, irritability you can't explain, emotional sensitivity that surprises you. These moods often have a quality Jung called Anima moods. They feel foreign, not quite yours, as if something else is moving through you. Pay attention to your projections. When you meet a woman and immediately feel intense attraction, fascination, or idealization, pause. Ask yourself, what qualities does she seem to embody? Is it her groundedness, her creativity, her emotional expressiveness, her wildness, her wisdom? Write these down, because here's the key insight. Those qualities aren't primarily about her. They're aspects of your Anima showing you what your psyche needs to develop. This doesn't mean your attraction is false or that you shouldn't pursue relationships. It means understanding the difference between seeing someone clearly and projecting your soul onto them. When you can recognize, I'm attracted to her spontaneity because I've become too rigid, you've taken the first step toward conscious relationship, both with her and with your own unlived spontaneity. Notice your fantasies, the women who appear in your daydreams, the scenarios you create, the qualities that obsess you. These are messages from the Anima. She's showing you what's missing, what needs attention, what wants to come into consciousness. Don't judge these fantasies as good or bad. Treat them as communication from your unconscious. Jung's technique of active imagination offers a direct method for engaging the Anima. Find a quiet space, close your eyes, allow an image of a feminine figure to emerge from your imagination. Don't force it, let it come naturally. It might be someone specific or a figure you don't recognize. Once you have a clear sense of her presence, begin to dialogue with her. Ask her questions. Who are you? What do you want me to know? What am I not seeing? Allow her to respond. This isn't about making up a conversation. It's about giving voice to the autonomous contents of your unconscious. Her answers might surprise you, challenge you, reveal things you didn't consciously know. Write down these dialogues. The act of writing makes the unconscious conscious, gives form to the formless. Over time, you'll notice patterns, themes, recurring messages. This is your Anima's guidance becoming available to your waking consciousness. Pay attention to your dreams. The Anima appears in dreams as various feminine figures, sometimes beautiful, sometimes terrifying, sometimes wise, sometimes destructive. These aren't random. They're showing you the current state of your relationship with your inner feminine. A threatening Anima figure suggests she's been too long ignored and has become negative. A helpful, wise anima suggests integration is progressing. A seductive anima might be trying to pull you into unconsciousness. Start developing the qualities you've projected. If you're drawn to women who are emotionally expressive, begin your own emotional work. Learn to identify feelings, articulate them, allow them space in your life. If you're fascinated by creative women, engage your own creativity. Write, paint, play music, whatever calls to you. If you idealize intuitive women, develop your intuition, trust gut feelings, notice synchronicities, honor non-rational knowing. This is the actual work of integration, taking back the projections by living the qualities yourself. It doesn't mean becoming feminine in a gender role sense. It means becoming psychologically whole by including the full range of human capacities, regardless of whether your culture labels them masculine or feminine. Examine your relationships honestly. Are you constantly disappointed after initial infatuation? That's projection lifting. Are you attracted to the same type repeatedly? That's your anima showing you a particular aspect of yourself you haven't integrated. Are you in a relationship but fantasizing about someone else? Your anima might be showing you qualities missing from your current life that need development, in yourself, not in finding someone new. The work requires distinguishing between the anima's legitimate guidance and her destructive possession. When she makes you moody, irrational, unable to function, that's possession. She's running you because you won't listen. When she speaks through intuition, creative inspiration, emotional depth that enhances your life, that's guidance. She's working with you because you've made space for her. Watch for what Jung called anima opinions, rigid, emotional judgments that feel absolute but aren't based on clear thinking. She's the only one who understands me. Without her, my life is meaningless. No one else could ever compare. These are signs the anima is distorting perception, making relationships impossible by setting standards no human can meet. The integration process isn't linear. You'll have insights, then forget them. You'll recognize a projection, then fall into it again. You'll develop emotional capacity, then shut down when overwhelmed. This is normal. The psyche doesn't transform overnight. It's a lifelong process Jung called individuation, becoming the individual you actually are beneath the personas and projections. One crucial marker of progress. You'll start seeing women as separate, complex, complete individuals rather than carriers of your projections. Your relationships will become more real, less fantasy, driven, grounded in mutual recognition rather than idealization. You'll experience genuine intimacy knowing and being known, rather than the intoxication of projection. And paradoxically, by turning inward to meet your anima, you become more capable of authentic connection outward. By integrating your feminine side, you become whole enough to truly see another person's wholeness. The inner work enables the outer relationship. What does it look like when a man has done this work? When the anima has been recognized, engaged, integrated. Imagine Michael 5 years into his anima work. He's in a relationship, but it's different now. When he feels intense attraction to his partner, he pauses to ask himself, what am I projecting? What's actually her, and what's me seeing myself in her? This doesn't diminish his love. It makes it more real. He sees her clearly, appreciates her actual qualities, doesn't need her to be perfect because he's not seeking completion through her anymore. When conflicts arise, he doesn't become defensive or shut down emotionally. He's developed access to his feelings, can articulate them, can sit with discomfort. His anima has taught him emotional intelligence, not as a concept, but as lived capacity. He's in touch with his interior life. Dreams interest him, intuitions guide him, creativity flows more freely. He's become more than he was, not by addition but by inclusion, bringing in what was always there but unconscious. David has transformed his restlessness into creative engagement. Those fantasies of other women revealed what was missing not in his marriage, but in himself. He's rekindled creative pursuits he abandoned decades ago. He's learned to honor emotional depth, to value feeling alongside thinking, to access the interior richness his anima was desperately trying to show him. His marriage has actually deepened because he's no longer projecting his unlived life onto it. He's living that life himself. Alex has demolished his fortress. It wasn't protecting him, it was imprisoning him. Engaging his anima meant facing the hurt that made him build those walls, feeling the emotions he'd declared weakness, admitting his need for connection. He's discovered that emotional vulnerability isn't the opposite of strength. It's a different kind of strength, the courage to be fully human. He's open to relationships again, not seeking salvation in them, but bringing his wholeness to another's wholeness. The integrated man doesn't lose his masculinity. He becomes more fully masculine by including the feminine. He's strong and sensitive, decisive and intuitive, rational and emotional, active and receptive. He contains opposites without being torn apart by them. This is what Jung meant by individuation, not achieving perfection, but achieving wholeness. He experiences life with greater depth. Colors are more vivid, music more moving, beauty more accessible. This isn't sentimentality. It's the result of being in touch with the feeling function, the intuitive function, the imaginal capacity the anima guards. Life becomes ensouled, meaningful, rich with significance beyond the material and practical. His relationships with women transform. Without projection distorting his vision, he can finally really see them. Not as ideals or disappointments, not as completers or saviors, but as separate, complex, fascinating individuals worthy of genuine relationship. He experiences real intimacy because there are two actual people present, not one person and a projection screen. He's more creative because creativity flows from the unconscious, and the anima is the bridge to those depths. Artists, poets, musicians have always known this. The muse isn't out there. She's the inner guide leading to creative source. Integrated men become creative in their own ways, whether in art, problem, solving, or simply the art of living itself. He's less driven by ego needs and status anxieties. Having encountered the larger self through anima work, the ego's demands seem smaller, less ultimate. There's a capacity for perspective, for humor about oneself, for holding life more lightly while taking it more seriously. But this isn't a destination, it's an ongoing relationship. The anima continues to guide, challenge, reveal new depths. Integration isn't a final achievement, but a dynamic process. You don't master your unconscious, you learn to dance with it. You don't conquer the anima, you befriend her, listen to her, allow her wisdom to inform your consciousness while maintaining your center. The man who has done this work becomes, in Jung's language, individuated, not perfect, not complete in the sense of finished, but whole in the sense of including rather than excluding, integrating rather than fragmenting. He becomes himself, finally, deeply, truly. And that self is larger, richer, more mysterious than the narrow identity he started with. The transformation isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming who you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning, projection, and one-sided development. Remember that moment I described at the beginning, locking eyes with a stranger and feeling your world shift. Now you understand what's actually happening. It's not fate. It's not destiny. It's your anima stirring, projecting herself outward, showing you in external form what exists in internal depths. The woman you've been seeking, the one who seems to hold the key to meaning, depth, and soul, she's been inside you all along. Not literally, but psychologically. She's the feminine aspect of your psyche, the guide to your unconscious, the carrier of qualities your conscious identity has excluded. Jung's discovery of the anima wasn't just a theoretical concept. It was a map to psychological wholeness, a path through the illusions that keep men trapped in projection and one-sidedness. Understanding her doesn't diminish the mystery of attraction or the beauty of relationship. It deepens both by grounding them in truth. The work of meeting your anima, recognizing her influence, and integrating her wisdom is perhaps the most important psychological journey a man can undertake. It's not easy. It requires honesty about your projections, courage to feel deeply, willingness to develop aspects of yourself you've long ignored. But the rewards are profound. You become whole rather than fragmented. You see clearly rather than through the distorted lens of projection. You access emotional depth, intuitive wisdom,